Hello and welcome to China Tonight. I'm Stan Grant. On the program, honouring the ancestors at the Qingming Festival. And inside Ukraine, a Chinese witness to the Russian assault.
The enemy didn't kill us yet. The enemy didn't destroy my apartment yet.
First tonight, what's making news on the platforms the people themselves use, Weibo and WeChat. Joining me is Yvonne Yong. And Yvonne, Beijing appears to have a growing problem in Shanghai, still in lockdown, as the government persists with a zero COVID strategy.
Hi Stan, yes, 25 million residents have been in lockdown on and off for weeks. Cases are on the rise and now residents are saying they're starting to run out of food. Some have reportedly taken to their balconies to protest. Which prompted this extraordinary scene shared on Weibo of a drone delivering a message to protesters. Well, netizens didn't hold back.
Which restriction says we can't open the window?
I just realized there are many things I can actually control. I guess I underestimated myself.
And Shanghai officials have promised to do better.
We are still inadequate in a lot of our tasks, falling short of our civilians' expectations. But for sure, we will go all out to improve our work.
Despite this, President Xi Jinping praised the country's COVID response on Friday, saying the recent success of the Olympic Games proved China was on the right track.
中国的防疫政策再次经受住了考验，为全球抗疫和举办国际重大活动提供了有益经验。
Nikoko Chan is an artist and photographer who's been living in Shanghai for almost a decade, and she joins me now. Nikoko, thanks for giving us your time. Can you give us a sense of what life is like for you right now in Shanghai?
It feels awful, I'll be quite honest. It's a really terrible time for, I think, all of us here. There's a lot of anxiety. I was also here in January and February of 2020 during kind of COVID 1.0. But it's quite different now because it's an enforced lockdown. So previously people were kind of self-quarantining, but there was no restriction on your movement, whereas now you just cannot go outside.
Tell us about that, because you used that word enforced. What does that mean? We know how strict things can be in China, but what happens if you go outside or if you break the rules?
If you really push and like try to break out of your compound, they will have the authorities come and arrest you. There were a few videos circulating around social media of people kind of like trying to charge out, and it's never a happy ending for those people.
Nikoko, how do you survive in a lockdown like this? I'm talking about the essentials like food and so on. What's daily life like for you? Basic
necessities is a really big problem right now. Right now, people are not allowed outside. Like restaurants are closed. There's a huge shortage of delivery people, so you can't get food. I don't know how to make people understand what that feels like. It's like Shanghai has 26 million people. That is 5 times the population of Sydney. That's 3 times the population of New York. Imagine if you live in one of these mega cities and you literally cannot buy an egg. You cannot buy an apple. It doesn't even matter how much money you're willing to spend, you just can't get it. So basically, it's kind of like Hunger Games for food. People have alarms set for when the very limited grocery suppliers restock, and everyone is really just trying to compete to get their order in. It's really frustrating to feel like the government has kind of self-imposed food insecurity on the city.
If you do contract COVID, if you test positive, what happens?
The difference between COVID in Shanghai now versus COVID in Shanghai in 2020 is that this is one of the very rare situations where the known is actually much scarier than the unknown. If you test positive for COVID, you are going to be taken to a quarantine facility where that can mean a lot of different things. One example is they turned the Expo Center into this kind of like makeshift housing situation where there's 16,000 people, there's no showers, there's all porta potties, no privacy, lights stay on all the time. Maybe you're put on a bus and taken to another province Maybe some people are also taken to an unfinished construction site. So that in itself is very scary. Your building will be immediately kind of like locked off and quarantined, and then your entire compound then gets added additional lockdown time.
Is this lockdown excessive or is it necessary?
These types of measures were really effective for controlling COVID in 2020. I think that was a time where overreacting, like in hindsight, countries that overreacted and had a lot more protective policies in place did fare better. When you look at the fatality rate of COVID, China did fare significantly better than a lot of other countries. But in theory, the major difference should be vaccines. That China boasts of having a very high vaccination rate. So I think a lot of people don't understand, if most of the population is vaccinated and the symptoms of having COVID are going to be very mild, why are we going through so much sacrifice to contain it?
Not everything controversial on the internet is suppressed with the kind of enthusiasm we've seen in Shanghai. Men's rights activism and the alt-right culture has been proliferating across the internet in China, as it has in much of the world. But how widespread is it in China, and what are their demands? Yehan is a pseudonym for a Uyghur reporter who lives in exile in Australia. He has this story.
There's a new video game causing a stir on China's social media. It's called Survival Guide for an Average Confident Man in the Metaverse, and the premise is pretty simple. You play the role of a college graduate presented with different scenarios while trying to get ahead in life. The game has received a lot of backlash for its misogynistic storylines. It's a basic 2D game where you just click left or right on different options. But despite being so poorly made, players have given it a mostly positive rating on Steam, the world's biggest video game distributor. It's also received popular support amongst men's rights activist groups, a growing force on the Chinese internet.
What they share in common is they believe that men are disadvantaged in current Chinese society, and they attribute that to a feminist movement.
Incels in the West are essentially people who blame feminism for their inability to find a partner. Same in China, where many Chinese average competent men are concerned about perceived vanishing traditional virtues. They're also ultra-nationalist and have a visceral hatred towards feminist activism.
In China, for large cohort of men, they are both supportive of the nationalist discourse and supportive of the anti-feminist movement.
Part of their frustrations comes from the odds they're playing. The now abandoned one-child policy means that there are nearly 34 million more males than females, leaving many doomed in efforts to find a partner.
The internet is just creating an echo chamber for this group of people, for them to voice their own politics in the online environment and trying to seek support from each other.
And they aren't afraid to attack those who disagree with them.
My name is Liang Xiaowen, or Xiaowen Liang. I'm currently an attorney in New York, but I'm also a Chinese feminist activist and organizer.
In 2021, Liang Xiaowen publicly supported a fellow feminist on Weibo who was being targeted online.
Because I'm actually someone who's not in China, I'm working in the US, and I'm also a feminist activist, I became one of the targets. One of the main things I received is that people want me to die. People hope that me and my family would get into car accidents. And a lot of the things are about how I am working for CIA and working for the US government, which is completely not true.
Dr. Peng says many in these communities become wrapped up in conspiracy theories or use controversial current events to garner online exposure and support.
Most recently, when a gender issue become a heated debate issue, they also voice their own argument on social media platforms.
Weibo suddenly censored Liang's account, but the accounts attacking and threatening her remained.
They were not being punished. They were not being banned. And then I decided to look into them, like who were they in one of the influencers' portfolio. they outright just putting that they are Muslim haters. And he can put content and information to justify hating Muslim and Black people, and he's an influencer. And he's one of the people that attack me, and they are not instigating hate according to Weibo's community rule.
On Baidu Tieba, the Chinese equivalent to Reddit, once popular channels such as feminism have been banned, but channels called anti-feminism and only marrying virgins are still active.
They are being provided a platform to smear feminists. That's the sad truth, and that's how the algorithm is working right now to censor women's voices.
Because in Chinese society, in order to achieve the gender equality, that requires fundamental change to the political system. And so the government tend to suppress this kind of feminist voices.
Liang tried to sue Weibo for censoring her profile.
They refused to take my case.
While even the word feminism is being sensitive in China, joining stigmatized concepts such as democracy and human rights, men's rights activists are finding an abundance of virtual spaces to express their views.
The Chinese social media is being dominated by these people. They don't have anything to stop them.
Now let's look at what else is making news in China. And Yvonne, China's planned security pact with Solomon Islands has American officials planning a visit.
The US National Security Council coordinator for the South Pacific, Kurt Campbell, will reportedly travel to Solomon Islands this month. That's according to the Financial Times. Now, the trip follows the leak of a draft deal, later confirmed by the Solomon Islands government, which would potentially allow China to station military personnel in the strategically important country. Last week, 2 of Australia's top intelligence officials travelled to Honiara to meet with Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare to express concerns over the deal. It's not clear what Mr. Campbell's mission would entail, but Chinese officials say there's no reason to be concerned.
中苏安全合作不针对任何第三方，与所同其他国家合作互不冲突，可对地区现有合作机制形成有益的补充。
And Zhao Lijian from the Foreign Ministry said Australia needs to abandon the Cold War mindset. This time he was referring to Australia's plan to develop hypersonic missiles.
It's a joint effort with the US and the UK to develop the weapons, which can travel at least 5 times the speed of sound and have a range of more than 2,000 kilometres.
美英澳将合作开发高超音速武器等先进军事技术，这不仅加大核扩散风险，冲击国际核不扩散体系，也更加加剧亚太军备竞赛，破坏亚太和平稳定。
China denies testing its own hypersonic weapons technology last year.
And Yvonne, the war in Ukraine has prompted an unusual level of commentary within China, but the government has persisted with a refusal to condemn or fully support the Russian actions.
Indeed, Stan, US President Joe Biden has called the Russian president a war criminal following Ukrainian claims that more than 300 civilians were killed by Russian soldiers in Bucha, just outside Kyiv last week.
This guy is brutal, and what's happening in Bucha is outrageous.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says the reports are disturbing, but has stopped short of blaming Russia for the deaths.
事件的真相和原委 必须查清，人道主义问题不应被政治化，任何指控都应当基于事实。
Now, China has also voted against a United Nations General Assembly move to suspend Russia's membership of the Human Rights Council.
对如此重大的事项，必须极为慎重，基于事实和真理。 冷静、客观、理性的处理。
Thanks, Yvonne.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, Wang Jishan is a Chinese national who lives in Odessa and has been documenting the war with daily Mandarin vlogs.
4月7号晚上10点50，刚刚有2声轰炸。
His videos went viral in China as he showed followers what was happening in the war-torn country beyond what was being broadcast on official channels. Now, the notoriety has also attracted backlash from some who called him a traitor for his anti-Russia stance and have seen his family harassed and WeChat account closed. I spoke to him earlier and asked him what life is like in Odessa.
There's no any culture and entertainment activity, that's for sure, because we have a curfew, we cannot go out in the night. And we are kind of getting used to the sirens every night. When the sirens are running, you don't see people are panic and running. You know, some of the children, some of mom, they are still playing with their children and ignoring the siren. We're not getting afraid, because why we do that? We are so much trust our defenders, I believe. We have a more upgraded weapon and the defenders are working so hard. They are protecting us well so far till now.
But Jishen, there must be times when you feel afraid.
No, to be really honest with you, we feel annoying. It's just not allow me to sleep well. And it makes us angry. The enemy didn't destroy my apartment yet, but what the enemy want is we getting afraid and running away, abandon our home, our life. Why we should let the enemy happy?
You had the option to leave. Why didn't you?
My home is here. My life is here. My friends are here. I can walk away. No, I cannot. I mean, when I need help, they come to help me. When they now need help, if people ask me to abandon them and I walk away, I will live the rest of my life in self-blaming.
Now, Jishen, you've become very well known because of your videos and your writing, but that also has a downside. You've described what it feels like to be a public enemy, how people in China have turned on you.
This sounds like a joke. How possible a country is afraid he's a citizen who is a programmer and just take a part-time job, shoot some video, like taking me half an hour every day, and they are so afraid about it. Well, which is true. I've been already considered as a public enemy, which is easy for proving that. You know, this country never give you a document. Hey, from this moment, you are my enemy. They never do. But what you can try, show my face. Now you have my face. And you can create a Weibo or WeChat or whatever Chinese social media account. Don't say anything. Just say, hello, it's Jishen. Today is April 10th, and I'm still alive. In 1 hour, they will block your account. My face is now that much powerful.
Does this mean that you won't be able to return to China now?
They want me to be able to back to China. And they want to ensure me will stay in maybe some jail of China for the rest of my life. So technically, I have to correct you. It's not like I cannot return. I can return directly from the airplane to jail. Yes, so I can. Did I afraid? I told you no. And I'm not a regret about what I'm doing.
Are you prepared to go to jail? Is that what you're saying?
Who want to go to jail? But I'm just not afraid about to go to jail, because it will not stop what I'm saying and doing every day. They think going to jail for the rest of your life is a life threat. But come on, it's a joke. This is more scary than the nuclear threat. We are facing to nuclear threat. The missiles was exploded next to my window on my birthday morning. Is that change my mind? No. It only make us being stronger.
Jishen, thank you again for giving us your time and speaking to us. Stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Bikes in China have a long history. For much of the last century, they've been synonymous with urban and rural life across the country. So much so that China was once known as the Bicycle Kingdom, but not anymore. Annie Louie explains.
They used to be everywhere. But today, China's relationship with the bicycle is complicated. Bikes made it to China from Europe in the late 1800s, but they weren't popular right away.
The early 20th century, really, the way most people went from point A to point B was walking. There was no alternative. They couldn't afford other ways.
Born in Guangzhou in 1938 to an American father and a Chinese mother, Edward Rhodes has written about the history of the bike in China.
It was really not until after the communists come to power in 1949 that some of the other modes of transportation became forbidden.
You see, China's wealthy were used to being carried around on sedan chairs or tugged along by rickshaws. But that didn't quite fit the egalitarian image of communist ideology. And so the bicycle was quickly adopted as a proud symbol of the proletariat.
So in fact, it was called the freedom bike or a freedom vehicle because it allowed you to free yourself from that dependence. To ride in a rickshaw where you sit and somebody else does the labor for you, you propel yourself.
In 1949, the party's vice president, Liu Shaoqi, visited a bike factory and tasked them with building a bicycle to represent the new China. And so the flying pigeon bicycle took off. These bikes became a symbol of development. In fact, Deng Xiaoping promised a flying pigeon bicycle in every household.
At that point, they defined progress and prosperity in those terms.
Soon, every household did own a bike. In the 80s, the number of them in China tripled, and they peaked in the mid-90s at 523 million. US President George H.W. Bush was even gifted a flying pigeon back in the 90s while on a visit to China. But soon, everything changed. In 1994, the State Council issued the Automobile Industry Production Policy, which began a shift towards car manufacturing and auto-centric urban planning. The Ministry of Housing went so far as to describe bikes as an inferior mode of transport. In Beijing, bicycle use fell from 62.7% of road transport in 1986 to only 15% in 2014.
I think the ideas are changing.
Aaron Zhang is the founder of 51 Bike, a social media platform in China that connects cyclists and organises events and races.
30 years ago, maybe in my parents' generation, when they get married, they need to buy a new bicycle. It's a big equipment. It's like a television. In our generation, when people get married, they buy a car, buy a new car.
Things have changed so drastically that in 2010, dating show contestants made headlines across the country after this exchange.
以后愿不愿意经常陪我一块儿骑单车？
我还是坐在宝马里哭吧。
Yeah, bikes are like for losers. Now, cars have overtaken bikes with over 300 million registered vehicles on the roads. The gig economy did see the trusty bike come back into fashion for a short period. By 2016, China accounted for 7 out of every 10 shared bicycles worldwide.
Instead of dying, there is this enormous upsurge of interest in bicycles, no longer privately owned, but all these millions of bicycles and all these different companies competing to rent bicycles to people.
But then the bike-sharing bubble burst as fast as it inflated.
Thousands are now ending up in rubbish dumps.
I mean, they were literally just dumping the bicycles after they finished riding.
But it seems this isn't the end of the story for the trusty bicycle. Recently, the government outlined its Healthy China 2030 plan, which encourages healthier lifestyles and sports like cycling.
I think that it's changing back to the people viewing bicycle not as a working class symbol. In some degree, it's a big investment for the health.
And people like Aaron are on a mission to make cycling cool again.
We organize activities, we organize races, we talk to sponsors and governments, organize bicycle races in different cities to help local people get tourists.
But cycling hasn't taken off at an elite level compared to other sports. Only a handful of Chinese riders have competed in big races like the Tour de France.
Most Chinese people are into football, basketball, and big sports. I think it might take 50 or 100 years for Chinese to win a Tour de France.
All right, Aaron, challenge accepted. Oh God. How did I make it look so easy?
And Annie Louis joins me now. Annie, looking at that, you're probably not likely to enter the Tour de France anytime soon.
Well, maybe not for the Chinese team, but I have hope with the right training regime, I might be able to make the Aussie team for the Olympics. What do you think, Stan?
Well, yes, the right training regime might be the appropriate part of that. Hey, listen, as there's been this decrease in bikes, there's also been an increase in cars, and that comes with a downside, doesn't it, especially for the environment?
Yes, Beijing is one of the most congested cities in the entire world, and they've tried to curb things since the 2008 Olympics, when they found that using license plate numbers and doing an even-odd system for when you can drive, alternating the days really helped with that and reduced congestion by a lot. And they've since adopted that around the year, but it did have its shortcomings. They found that congestion increased again after 2 years, so now they're doing a license lottery instead, and they're also promoting electric vehicles and cycling too.
Good move. Annie, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, China celebrated one of its most important cultural events this week, the Qingming or Tomb Sweeping Festival. While many in lockdown were forced to mark the day virtually at home, it's a day that is celebrated across the world. China Tonight met King Fong, who explained the importance of the festivities.
The Chinese family is by tradition always hell-bound by old customs, and Qingming is the most important in regard to the deceased. At the cemetery, we come and commemorate people who have passed on. Qingming in Chinese means clear and bright, and that has been introduced over 1,000 years ago, where the emperor decided that the people should worship the elderly who have passed on. Before the service, we start cleaning and also putting fresh flowers. The tradition of burning paper and joss sticks is a communication area. The smoke reaches the heavens, and that reaches the deceased. And the joss paper, that represents the person who had deceased, part of his wealth and his favourite maybe vehicle or camera or whatever he had from the family. We can now replicate that in paper form. We have paper cars, paper watches, paper furniture, paper rings, and that is like to return to the deceased, that we respect what he has done, what he has worn. It's more of a reminder of the treasured memories we had with the deceased. The suckling pig, the whole pig, is roasted and served, so that means that we have been blessed by the deceased, by his richness, his happiness, and we have been able to transfer that rich and happiness from the deceased to the current living survivors. We feel that it's like a responsibility of maintaining the old culture and tradition, and it's carried on to the younger generation so that they feel that they belong. By blessing and worshipping in a Qingming, it's the time to rejoice, to say thank you for the good times we had together, and offer the hope that I will be able to carry out some of the good virtues that this deceased was able to carry out when they were alive.
And that's all for this week. We'll be back after the Easter break. I'm Stan Grant. Have a great night.